So I've played 100 hours of BDO in 2024 already, and well, this is the review. There will be chapters in the video description as well as, in the timeline. So if you want to jump to the score at the very end, you can do that, or if you want to jump to different parts of the review or what we did, you can also do that. So let's get started, and maybe we'll get started with what BDO even really is. BDO used to be a PvE and PvP MMORPG when it launched, mainly focusing on grinding, the standard Korean grinder. At the very launch of it, it had also very little cash up stuff, and well, that changed over time, obviously, as it always does, right? So at the very beginning, or later on, the game developed into a PvE grinder with a very high focus on open world. So that means the open world was very populated. There was a lot of open world PvP. There was a lot of competition on your specific grind spots, and there was a lot of competition between guilds on specific grind spots, essentially creating an open world PvP scene. And that eventually became also a siege and node war scene, so a large scale PvP event that would occur either every other day with node wars or every Saturday for a siege. Yeah, I don't know. I can't even kill him.
F56 almost killed me. F57 almost killed. He's killing me. Someone do something. Cut the stream.
And you're supposed to be in a fucking meme guild. Catapulicious from Spicy says that we shouldn't troll people. We shouldn't have what a fucking white knight cut.
After watching that again, those were some good fucking times, weren't they? Nowadays, BDO's not so focused on PvP anymore, and sieges and open world PvP and stuff like that. And they've shifted away from that type of endgame into a more relaxed environment, meaning there is actually instanced grind spots now that you can get into every other hour, meaning that no one can compete with you, no one can fight you, no one can gank you, A lot of people find that very annoying if they just want to chill and relax and grind, so you can do that every other hour now. On top of that, everyone gets a tier 9 horse for free. Traversing the land is very easy. Getting ganked while you have a Pegasus is also pretty hard to do. And on top of that, there's also the Magnus quest line and various other quest lines that help you progress your character. So it's much more streamlined. And on top of that, there's literal teleports on the map now, where you can traverse, large parts of the map with literally just a teleport. So it's a lot less about the open world, it's a lot less about the sandbox feel, but it's much more about the individual character's progression. So if you're into that, if you're a very long-term, maybe even a solo-minded player, I would highly recommend BDO still today. If you're more of a PvP, maybe more of a competitive PvE kind of player, probably not really your cup of tea anymore. So yeah, I think that's basically the main thing I wanted to talk about here, that the game has kind of shifted from a more PvP-centric endgame focus to a more do whatever you like and progress at your own pace, and eventually, you'll get your gear upgrades. Although that comes with obviously one problem, and that is a lot of people lack meaning in all of the grind, because technically all you're really doing is you're grinding or you're life skilling just to life skill or grind faster or more efficiently. So yeah, for a lot of people that's not enough to keep going, and that includes me. So let's first of all go into what I've even done in the 100 hours, so you kind of get an understanding what we tried out. Because the game has changed a lot over the years, and nowadays there's a couple of content pieces that haven't existed before, so obviously I wanted to try them out. If you're a completely new player, your experience will be quite different, because you will probably start on a season server, and then you will be tasked with a lot of different things, including a lot of quest lines and a lot of journals that I think are terrible early game content. I think if you're a new player, the first 100, 200 hours are actually going to be a lot of quest lines, if you want to be efficient, that is. Obviously you can skip them in the beginning too, but also that brings me to what I've done first, which was figuring out what the hell is going on with my inventory. This is what I'm talking about. What is all this? Oh my god. This game has, well, it's an older MMO, obviously, so there's a lot of items, there's a lot of buffs, there's a lot of events, there's a lot of things going on, and just figuring that out took a while. So that's the first thing that I did. I basically sat around and we just figured out what kind of items I have, which ones are valuable, and so on, right? Then we had to figure out what kind of buffs we need to use, because that's also incredibly bloated in BDO. Just to grind, there's like a couple different buffs you even have to think about, like church buff, loot scroll, your black spirit can give you buffs, you have a food buff, you have an elixir rotation, you could even run a perfume, you have an alchemy stone, you have a tent buff, and then a second tent buff on top of that, just, you know, to give you an example. You can obviously, you know, spin that even further, and you have even more buffs and more efficient elixir rotations and whatever. But just getting into that was also already confusing. Okay, so there's already the first pretty big issue, I think, but a lot of older MMOs have that, where they shower you with different items and you don't even know like what half the things are. And then you pair that with that many buffs to be efficient while grinding, which can become pretty exhausting pretty quickly. Then we started grinding Star's End, Tortuga, then I tried out Akhman Temple in the desert, which is gonna get a little bit of a new light in it, which is a new Dekia spot very soon, which is more of an endgame area. And then we tried Sakraya, the underwater area, and at the very end Orcs, because I got a couple of upgrades and I had finally had enough DP to actually grind there. Then we tried out Black Shrine, which is a new solo bossing mode which was introduced last year, meaning you can actually go into different boss fights on different difficulties and, you know, fight them 101. So it's not quite gear balanced, there's still a lot of things that matter in these fights, but it's a lot more gear balanced than the rest of the game, basically. Maybe with the exception of the arena, which is completely gear balanced, but we'll get into that. So here I had a great time fighting, well, what was supposed to be the easiest boss on highest difficulty. Turns out that my gear does matter a little bit, and it also turns out having 4,000 health isn't the best idea to do the hardest difficulty bosses with. So, you know, there's not even a window after, even if you do iframe it. Where am I? Where am I? Where? Oh, no. What? This game is fucking ass! Who's coding this? What? Yes! That happened. Then we did some fishing. Oh, here it comes. Oh yeah, I remember now. Okay, we got 3 silicons. How much money is this? We did some cooking, then I looked at hunting, and I honestly thought hunting looked like a 2000s German chicken hunting game. So I passed on that. Then we tried out a little bit of PvP, but not much has changed since last time I played. PvP, by the way, you have battlegrounds, you have arenas that are balanced. Gear balance, only the arenas are gear balanced, everything else isn't. There is also capped sieges and node wars now, so depending on what gear you have, you know, it will be capped, so you can't completely outgear your opponents. And then we also did some upgrades and enhancing, obviously. We looked at the cache, and we basically did everything. So let's look at the actual review now. So starting out, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of quests. And BDO quests, just like most Korean MMOs, are kind of terrible. And by kind of terrible, I mean very terrible. Like, if you're not interested in having like listening and following a storyline, this is just torture. I hate it. I hate every fucking storyline in BDO, every single one. I can't stand. All of them are boring as fuck and take way too long. And the worst one is the newest one, which is Land of the Morning Light, which you have to do the single solo boss fight. So I had to go through that. It took like, I don't know, 8 hours, if not longer than that. Jesus Christ, that was really fucking painful. And we can also quickly talk about the journals, which I also touched on earlier a little bit. These journals are basically little quest tasks that require you to do certain things in certain areas of the map. The best way to do these is with a guide, because obviously then you can min-max it much more. And what essentially happens is these things give you all kinds of stuff. Like, they give you more HP, they can also give you more AP, they give you more evasion, and these are permanent things. So you want to do these logs at some point, and they're, again, I don't think they're great content. They're basically just, you know, a collectible thing maybe, or something like that. I'm not a big fan of these. I think they're mostly just annoying to do, same with the quest lines, but that's one of the entry barrier requirements, I guess, to really get into the game, is you do all of the quest lines and you do all of the adventure logs, and then your character will feel a significant amount stronger without really getting better gear, right? Also, I want in this point in the starting out portion, there's a lot of items in this game. If you can see that right now, this is my inventory. Luckily, they added a new thing that's categories, and if you press Control F, you can also search for items, which is very helpful. But there's way too many items. Okay, I mean way too many items, and that kind of ties into the bloat of rewards as well. So if I just go to my Black Spirit save, just this amount of items from the Black Spirit Adventure, which is this annoying little dice you can see below my camera, which you can play a little mini game. There's just so much stuff everywhere, and as a new player or a returning player, this is incredibly overwhelming. They said they want to address that a little bit and, you know, combine some items into just one, so there's not as much bloat. But from buffs to items to even events, and I think that's actually a very big point. It ties into the cash up and the pay to win a little bit. The game has a lot of handouts, and I mean a lot of handouts. So if we, for example, just look at the reward tab here, so you have your challenge tab. So if you do separate things in the game, you get rewards for it. For example, just logging in gives me an experience scroll every day for 60 minutes, which you then also can combine to other things. You get loyalty, you get fail stacks, you get all kinds of life tool items, you get some value, you get a lot of cash up items also for free. But there's so many things, so many handouts in the game, that it even somewhat feels like they're overwhelming the actual systems in the game. What I mean by that, there's actually people who only log in for rewards. So that goes further into login rewards. As you can see, if you're a new player, you have literally 5 different login reward tracks. Then you have your daily special reward, or whatever it's called, where you can even buy a battle pass from, so you can get more loot. And there's another pass in when you play on the season server that gives you some stuff. There's so much. Like, to be honest, it gets even worse. So there's a website here called Garmoth, and which is probably the BDO website if you are starting out in the game. That it tells you, it gives you everything, all of the infos that you need. And it's just scrolling down here, you can see the events that are going on right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's 15 different events going on right now. Not only that, there's also coupon codes. So as you can see at the top right here, these coupons you can actually copy, and then you go into the game, go to Adventure Support and redeem the coupon code. So you can get even more rewards from putting all of your codes in here. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of stuff that you have to think about all the time. There's a lot of events, there's a lot of handouts, there's a lot of giveaways, there's login rewards, daily special, whatever the fuck, right? It's completely overwhelming. There's way too much rewards, and that kind of also a little bit takes away, in my opinion anyways, from the RPG sandbox feel. Because in an RPG sandbox, the things that you drop and that you farm are the things that you own, right? But here it feels like so many items and so many things you just get handed to you. Oh, you logged in today, here you have a box that you can gamble with, and there's a fuckload of things in that box, and you can literally become a millionaire in a day, just, which isn't by the way a lot, because having a lot of money in this game means you have like 100 billion, because the game is so incredibly inflated too. But yeah, that's a big point, and that's very annoying, especially for a new player. And obviously that also ties into the item bloat and the buff bloat and all of that stuff. So it's just an older MMO, and you know, they're trying to keep you in the game with overwhelming you with the amount of rewards and stuff. So let's talk about the open world real quick. I do think the world is still very pretty, and it's a massive world too. Like BDO's world is absolutely crazy big. And well, to traverse faster, they're basically giving all of the players mounts now for free. Although I thought that was a really cool system to actually tame a horse and then train it, and then breed it with other horses. All of that system is basically gone. You just get a Pegasus mount when you log in for the first time, and then you can upgrade it to an even better Pegasus later down the line. So the world is big, but it doesn't really feel like a world as much anymore as it used to be. It feels much smaller of a world than it used to be, because everyone has really good mounts. You can teleport around the map and so on. Then there's also stuff like Marnie Realm, which is a new addition that came last year, which basically made it so that you have your own individual grind spot every hour, which we just talked about, which basically means it also makes the game feel more instant. Same with the new bosses. There's also new dungeons. There's a lot more instanced content nowadays, so I think the sandbox world feeling isn't really there anymore, but there's still remnants of it. Also, I think let's talk about well, grinding and life skills in general. If you like long-term progression, and if you like seeing numbers go up and your silver go up and your character getting stronger, I actually think it's a great game to play. Again, you have basically infinite amount of content in there, and the same goes for life skills as well. They're repetitive, but they're very chill, and a lot of the life skills you can literally do AFK too. So, you know, if you have something better to do on another monitor or something, you can do that too. Let's also talk about the combat. I think BDO's combat is generally still the best in the industry. Every class feels really unique. It can be very technical at a high level, although well, there's a couple of problems with that, let's just say that. We will get into that in a second. But generally speaking, BDO's combat is actually still the best in the industry, in my opinion. If you like action combat, that is. I know for a lot of people it's a little bit too stressful, but there's a lot of abilities, there's a lot of combos, there's a lot of flowing. If you understand which abilities flow well into each other, there's a lot like that, and I would highly recommend playing a lot of the action combat and trying it out. Because once you're used to this action combat, there's very few games that have the same feel. And yeah, we can also talk about the PvE a little bit. There's basically grinding in a circle, or grinding, you know, endgame spots where you're not running in a circle, but rather just stand still. There is dungeons now, which you can basically do once a week, I believe. And they give you actually pretty good rewards. Although, again, even the hardest difficulty dungeons aren't like comparable to PvE MMOs like Lost Ark or WoW or Final Fantasy. So if you're looking for endgame boss fights that are really difficult and competitive, I wouldn't really recommend playing this game at all. But if you do want a challenge, you can always go into Black Shrine, which has a lot of different kinds of bosses that you can do. But for that, you obviously need to first do the quest lines. So solo bosses here, I actually genuinely think are pretty well made. The only problem is the engine isn't. And you know what? I'll just talk about this now. The engine of BDO, or whatever it is, whether it's the netcode or the coding in general, is super scuffed. Whenever the game requires you to have precise inputs, so that is very apparent when you play PvP, and it's very apparent when you play really difficult boss fights like these ones, in C7 specifically, it's really not worth it. It's really not worth it. The engine does not work properly with very specific inputs. There's a lot of desync. There's a lot of like weird bugs that happen where you get hit in super armors and iframes. The boss is literally across the screen and still hits me. And there's not even a window after, even if you do iframe it. Where am I? And other things like that. It's just not a good time, and I think the game is more easily enjoyed if you're a little bit more casual about, you know, competitiveness. So if you really care about min-maxing a boss fight or min-maxing PvP, I think this is not the correct game to do that in. I think there's so many limitations with the engine, and I think that holds back the entire game, honestly. They just need to revamp the engine, I'm pretty sure. And also get rid of a lot of the resistances in the game. So as you can see down here, I have stun, stiffness, freezing, 42% resistance, grapple 42, and so on. There is a certain degree where you can get rid of these resistances of people, but there's always, I believe, like I don't know what the percentage is, but there's always a base percentage where people can literally just resist your CC. So there's always RNG involved, and on top of that, you have a lot of desync and other buggy stuff that is obviously also pretty RNG, you can't predict. And it makes like very high competitive combat feel very RNG, and that's not good, obviously. It's very frustrating, actually. And that's obviously especially noticeable in PvP because there's two players being very fast and, you know, trying their best to kill each other, and there it's very apparent that a lot of the times nothing fucking works. So here's a little clip that I have. That's the only one I have left. It's not the best one. But you can see that my character is over here and my enemy, which is a Dracania, is over there. If you play that clip now, you can see I get instantly grabbed, although I was that far away from the character. That's because the game is not fast enough at responding to movement, so the game still thinks my character is over here because it's desyncing, and so he can easily grab me from very far away, although that doesn't make any sense. And this is something that happens not occasionally, this is something that happens all the time. You can get grabbed in your iframes, which by the way means invincibility frames. So you shouldn't be able to be hit or CC'd at all, but people still CC you in those. Super armor, same thing. Forward guard, same thing. There's just a certain amount of desync in the game that is always there, and you can't do anything about it. So it's just annoying, and if you're a very competitive player, I would recommend not playing BDO and playing another PvP game where, you know, combat actually works. And another thing that's a little bit sad is the open world PvP and the sieges and the guild versus guild stuff. It kind of made the game popular back in the day. It doesn't really exist anymore. So people like Lakari or King of Allgape and all of these PvP scenes in EU, for example, with Enemy and Sovereign, Leviathan, and all the drama there was with odds and all of these like storylines that existed back then. It's not really the same nowadays. The player base seems to be much less invested in the PvP endgame. Although you can still do all of those things, there seem to be just very, very few people heavily engaging with it, and even less people very invested in it. And that's kind of what I'm missing from BDO, and that's kind of sad to think about, but back in the day it seemed like there was actually, people were actually so invested. And even if you go to, you know, old school BDO Siege players today and ask them, you know, about stories back in the day, they will sit there for 30 minutes and they can tell you all the storylines that happened back in the day because people genuinely liked it that much. Not really the case anymore. So yeah, that's my point. One more quick thing before we get into the scoring, just as an example of how bad BDO's engine really is. FPS, so the more FPS you have in game, the more damage you do. And that should basically tell you everything about how the engine works, because it's just, there's so many little oversights in it that just make everything feel a lot worse. And it goes even that far, again, in very specific high-end scenarios. If you want to have optimal PvP combos on some classes, you literally need 200 FPS, or the combo doesn't work because it gives you attack speed. The more FPS you have, the more attack speed you have, and therefore the more damage you do. So again, in some scenarios, on some classes, if you can't reach a certain amount of FPS, you cannot do the PvP combos properly. You know, how does that even happen? It's always been like that, by the way, and they've never addressed it, unfortunately. So this is the scoring right now, but don't let this be too confusing for you, so I'll just explain it really quick. So masterpiece games are games that at the time of their release were literally outstanding, and even years after that are still considered the best in the industry, which these two I just took as an example. I would also probably put in Vanilla WoW, which released in 2005, 2004, but that would just confuse people and they would think that modern day classic WoW is, you know, is a 10, which it isn't, obviously. But yeah, just sort of as an example, and at the very bottom you can see Bless Online as a 1, Throne Liberty as a 2, although I still think Throne can go probably in one of these two categories. I think in our version, when it releases in the West, it will probably be a 3 because there will be less pay to win. Because Amazon usually puts a little bit less pay to win in there than the Korean counterpart. But as of it stands, this is what it is. New World and Diablo, I put in 3. And BDO, I was very unsure of. At first, I wanted to put it in 4 because all of the systems the game has, well, it has so many good building blocks. It has so many, like, it has an open world, it has PvP, which has an arena, and it has battlegrounds, it has open world PvP, it has guild versus guild PvP, it has node wars, it has sieges, right? It has a lot of content. And for PvP, then for PvE, you have dungeons now, you have grinding, you have professions, all kinds of them, with fishing and hunting and cooking and alchemy and gathering and whatever. And then you have even solo boss fights in the game. But all of these systems are compromised to an extent, meaning the PvP is really struggling because the engine is really terrible. There's way too much RNG in it, and there's also a lot of balance issues all the time. So even if you play the balanced arena, which is Arena of Solara, it still doesn't feel great. It still feels scuffed. And same goes for the solo boss fights. They're also scuffed. The engine can't keep up. There's a lot of weird things happening all the time. Same goes for professions. A lot of the professions literally just come down to you doing the same thing over and over and just progressing your gear so you can get more money from it. Life skills like fishing are basically completely abandoned, and you can, well, if you want to make any profit, you can't even do them. Grinding is also maybe the only thing that still works because it combines the really good combat system with casual environment, so the desync doesn't affect you as much, and you can just progress in your own time, so that is good. But again, all of the systems, there's so many different systems in the game that are good fundamentals, but completely underdeveloped, right? That's kind of my problem. Every system in the game has potential, but they're not using it properly. And a big part of that is also has to do with the pay to win, in my opinion, because some things are just, you know, you like artisan memories and cron stones and enhancing related stuff in general is completely, it's actually impossibly frustrating because there's so many pay to win systems on top of it that if you're doing it without any pay to win feels a lot worse. Progression in general, because I think the game is actually in general very progression centered, and it's very difficult to appreciate good progression if there's a lot of pay to win systems. That being said, in comparison to older BDO, the entry barrier for pay to win is much lower, so there's much less items that you have to buy because they give them out, you know, with events and rewards and login stuff, right? So there's much less incentive or much less upfront paying for BDO, much less of an entry barrier, but there's still a lot of ways you can definitely progress faster by paying. So that also kind of, you know, it always is a negative point for me, especially because they advertise it in the game too, and it's like, I don't know, it just seems really annoying and bloated, that too. That being said though, I still think BDO has the best combat in the genre, so it can't be a 4 out of 10. And I also think they have the best community management in the genre. There's actually community managers. There will be, you know, in Twitch chats talking to you. There will be like literal game masters in game doing events with you. Stuff like that is very undervalued in the modern MMO scene. So I also think this is outstanding. And also, just before we actually give you the score, if you just want a game that lets you progress in a chill way, maybe even while watching a movie on the second screen, and you just want to see your character become stronger slowly, just want to see your money go up, then I actually think BDO is probably a 7 out of 10. So just in that niche, the solo progression, do it at your own pace, no daily bullshit or very little kind of experience, I actually think BDO is good. I actually think you can play that as much as you want. There's infinite progression and you can keep going forever. Great, right? As an overall game though, I would put BDO at a 5. I think it's okay. I think a lot of the building blocks the game has are good. They're just underdeveloped. So here would be my top three things that I want to have changed in BDO. First, which they're kind of addressing a little bit already, is all of the item buff handout bloat. We don't need 15 events. We don't need 5 different login rewards. We don't need daily special on top of it with a battle pass. We don't need 50 billion different items that barely do anything. Like, you know what I mean? There's way too many things in the game, and that always happens with older MMOs, but it's especially apparent in BDO, so that's one thing that I definitely want to see changed. The second most important thing would be the engine or whatever causes the desync, because the solo boss fights and the PvP would be incredibly fucking good if the engine would work properly. If it didn't feel like this scuffed, buggy, desyncy mess that actually, and you know, maybe also get rid of the resistances on top of it, so you have even less RNG in the combat system. That would be really, really great. I would love that. That would make the game so much better instantly. Although I would also say it's probably one of the harder things to fix, because if it's related to your engine, that's probably very difficult to redo. Although they're working on a new engine for Crimson Desert, but you know, who knows. That would definitely make the game instantly a lot better, those two things. And the last thing that is also, I find really important, is there's a lack of goals in the game. Not as in like, oh yeah, I want to get that item or whatever, but lack of what you do with the items. So as an example, back in the day, the main reason why I grinded was to then use my gear in PvP and, you know, beat other people with my gear. Nowadays it feels much more like you grind to grind faster. You know, you run in a circle just to run in a circle faster. You, I don't know, go fishing or hunting just to make more money with hunting. It just feels like the goal of BDO right now is just to keep progressing. And I think for me personally, that is too little incentive. For me, I need something to look forward to. May that be new raids or dungeons or whatever. May that be actually good PvP. Whatever it is, it needs some sort of thing to look forward to. Something to progress towards. Something you're looking forward to. That's what's lacking for me. And it's ever since I've stopped doing sieges in PvP and BDO, that's always been my problem. That's why I could never fully come back to BDO, because I just didn't see a reason. I just didn't see a meaning behind my grinding. I just felt like I was running in a hamster wheel perpetually, and there was nothing, you know, changing that. So those are the 3 things that, if BDO changed, would instantly put it into a 7 out of 10. Maybe even an 8. Because as I said, I think BDO has all of the right things in place. All they need to do is work on their existing systems. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to add new gimmicks. Everything that's in place, the solo bosses, the dungeons, the professions, the world, the PvP systems with arenas, node wars, all of those things. The massive, like, different kind of PvE stuff that you can do, from whale hunting to hunting lions and whatever. You can do so many things in the game. Just use your existing foundation and develop it further. Polish it, refine it, and the game will instantly go to a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10. That is my take. So yeah, that was 100 hours of BDO. I will put it at 5 out of 10 for now. Again, with a lot of potential. And I also want to say that I don't want to put it ever below a 5 out of 10 because I do still believe BDO has always had and still has the potential to compete with the best MMOs in the industry if they stop working on gimmicks and rather work on their, you know, foundation and refine them. So that's my take. 100 hours of BDO, 5 out of 10. That might also be the highest rated MMO I've had on this channel, that I've officially rated anyways, which is kind of sad. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this was helpful. And I hope for anyone who is looking for a long-term progression-based MMO, that you also see that the game is actually pretty good. But for anyone else who's like me, who needs a little bit more incentive and a little bit more meaning, I would say you can try the game out. It's most of the time very cheap or even for free. And yeah, I think BDO has great potential, but it's not being realized right now. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. There will be more videos like this. I'm not really sure what the next 100 hours video is going to be. I'm kind of debating between Monster Hunter World and Lost Ark again. So if you have any takes on those, which game I should do next, feel free to put it in the comments as well. So yeah, have a good one, guys. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Nico Tulo, and I'm out. Peace.